Welcome back to The Heat. With its Belt and Road Initiative, China has been able to create a footprint in South Asia with large infrastructure projects. Over the last few years, China has invested billions of dollars in Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, for example. India has also been working to strengthen ties with places of its own. Let's get back to our panel right now. Haiyun Ma, I want to talk about the impact that this Belt and Road Initiative has had on security and stability in South Asia. Beijing believes and has mentioned several times that it believes that economic growth, that prosperity would lead to stability in places like Pakistan and of course in Afghanistan as well. Are we seeing any evidence of that?
I would say if you look at Chinese experience, Chinese always basically say if you have to achieve peace, you have to through development. So that's why if you look at Chinese economic policies after 1978 to today, you basically have different economic zones favored economic policies. So that's why you need to build all these frontier regions, ethnic minority regions. So that's why if you look at India and Pakistan, many of the regions where you have all this kind of trouble and violence actually located in borderline ethnic regions. So that's why Chinese lessons, Chinese experience, I think will be very valuable to India and Pakistan to stabilize its frontiers and ethnic regions so that in some achievement can be, economic prosperity will push for social, political peace and prosperity.
And so, Rob, if we take a country like Afghanistan, racked by violence for decades, how important is this initiative bringing stability to it?
It is important, but I would say at the margins, because there are deep political reasons why Afghanistan is in the state where it is, and there needs to be political solutions. And economics and even investment, hard investment, concrete on the ground can take you so far and no further. So it's definitely useful from that perspective, but I wouldn't overplay that the effect of these infrastructure projects in conflict regions to that extent. I would frame Belt and Road in context of what it is a version of China's own development model being taken overseas. China is telling countries, you have comparative advantages in certain sectors, latent comparative advantages. You have transaction costs and infrastructure deficiencies. We are here, we have done this before, and we are here to provide you financing and that sort of infrastructure to let you jump off from those latent comparative advantages. Now, it is for countries to be able to put that package together and really benefit from that. And in conflict zones, that will become difficult because it's difficult to jumpstart
right.
the progress like that. So I would say, from a security perspective, in a place like Afghanistan, it will help at the margins, particularly if all the big external players are on the same page on aid and infrastructure. But it will not go really far in terms of resolving the underlying political issues which are deep-seated.
Right, and Moeed, in a country like Pakistan, also concerned about security, concerned about stability, well, let me look at it this way. Does Pakistan see this economic relationship with China, does it extend to China being a diplomatic ally?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think it's the other way around. China is the diplomatic ally first, the security ally second, and the economic ally third. And as Pakistan's international options have shrunk, given the jaundiced relationship with the US, Afghanistan, the problems there, India, it's relied even more heavily on China. And some would argue too much and leaning too much on China. I think, the interesting part here, Anand, is that there are two models out there in the world, and only two so far. One is the US model, which says institutional building brings stability, and then you use the economy to rile that up. The Chinese model is throw money at the problem, it'll bring stability for you, and institutions will develop. China's done itself, implemented its model very successfully. The problem, I think Sourabh has put it absolutely rightly, is that when you bring in this money in a context where institutions are weak and unable to take this on, you get Afghanistan. Because to my mind, one of the problems in Afghanistan is too much money. The capacity wasn't there to absorb it. You got into all sorts of corruption and governance problems, and that's what's sort of fueling some of the insurgency there. In Pakistan's case, I think Pakistan's got a mix and match. They definitely need China for security. China is sort of the principal diplomatic ally in the worst of times. but now they're also looking at major Chinese economic investment as a stability factor. So all three have combined in Pakistan's case, and if it doesn't deliver here, I'm afraid then it shows that the model is probably not going to deliver elsewhere either.
Right, and Ronce, is there a concern in India that it might be losing influence in places like Sri Lanka and places like Nepal, for instance? Chinese media have been saying that China will retaliate if India continues to meddle in Beijing's diplomatic relations with countries like Nepal, like Sri Lanka.
Yeah, I think that that New Delhi is coming to terms with the fact that China has an increasing influence in its immediate neighborhood, whether it be Nepal or Sri Lanka, where India is part of India's traditional sphere of influence, whether politically, economically, or culturally. So yeah, I think that there's some tension that's arising from that fact, and that you're seeing some of that in the One Belt One Road pushback you're getting from China, and I mean from Delhi towards China. But I think getting back to your initial point about can economics trump politics or can politics trump economics, I think the answer is yes and yes. And so that if you don't give people an economic opportunity, an economic hope in some of these parts of the developing world, then that's going to turn into a political veto. But also if the institutions aren't built to enable these infrastructure projects to be executed properly, to get buy-in from the locals, and in which everybody prospers, then you're going to see a political veto from the top. So I think there's a delicate balance, if you will, in trying to achieve these goals.
Haiyun Ma, you said at the outset of the program that you think that India will ultimately become part of the Belt and Road project. What is the common ground that you see now?
If you look at India, especially in eastern part, you already have Indian participation in the Indian, Bangladesh, Burma, this economic corridor. And also if you look at the Indian investment in Iran, and India actually need to get Iranian oil and gas through Pakistan. And also if you look at the Indian search for gas from Turkmenistan, you have Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Indian pipeline. So that's why India really need to work at least in these three directions, Iranian, Pakistani borderland, India, Bangladesh borderland, and also now actually I think China really provided a good opportunity for India to cooperate in Indian, Pakistan, China, Pakistan, Afghan borderland. So that's why you really can build a corridor between Central Asia and South Asia. That's what United States and India really have pursued for a long time, since at least I think 2006, if you look at India's new Silk Road plan.
Sourabh, the Times of India, it's a very influential newspaper in India, it says, quote, New Delhi needs to take a cool-headed, objective view of Belt and Road and should evaluate its options and strengths. But very quickly, in the short term, what are the options for India?
In the short term, the option is no for India. The relationship has deteriorated. The larger bilateral relationship has deteriorated to a fair extent, as a result of which the impact is being felt on Belt and Road and on this initiative. And India cannot just quickly do a somersault and jump onto this initiative, right, because even while it is in the AIIB and in the new NDB, New Development Bank, those are multilateral institutions. While this is seen as a Chinese product, and a Chinese product which is to gain influence in South Asia and marginalize India. So that's not going to happen. But India's China policy is very heavily dependent, I would say, not so much on the Prime Minister even, but on the National Security Advisor, who typically doubles as a National Security Advisor. We have had National Security Advisors with a very broad horizons when the India-China relationship has gone up, and we currently have, and we had previously, National Security Advisors with a very narrow intelligence security mindset when the relationship has deteriorated. So as India's worldview changes when the National Security Advisor changes, hopefully we'll be in a better position.
Right, we have to end it there. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for watching.